It's with great pleasure that I welcome back Dr. Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, the title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. Sean, you have a special message for the listeners?
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention for all the parents and students who are listening to this great podcast, we have a really special offer only for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast for Prep Expert. So if your student is going to be taking an online SAT, ACT, PSAT course anytime soon, or is looking for one-on-one tutoring with top 1% tutors, head over to prepexpert.com. We offer live online courses for every college admissions exam. On top of that, we have the best score guarantees, best curriculum, and best instructors in the test prep industry. And just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast, you can get 20% off any online SAT or PSAT or ACT course, as well as one-on-one tutoring. So you can get 20% off. Just make sure you use the promo code College Talk. That's one word, College Talk, and you'll get 20% off just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast. And I hope you guys can use that to your advantage, save a bunch of money at prepexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Sean. And to everyone out there, once again, that promo code is College Talk. That's one word, College Talk. Thank you all, and best wishes.
Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante.
Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Larry Alterman, who's the Assistant Director and Manager of East Coast Recruitment at Michigan State. Now, Larry's been a great friend of the podcast. He came on to talk about Michigan State on episode 7. He also came back where we did an episode comparing a huge state school like Michigan along with an Ivy League school, Brown University. That was episode 250. Larry, such an honor and pleasure to have you back. How are you?
John, I'm great. I'm really excited to be here. It's hard to believe that I'm in my 16th admission cycle, and I am as excited, if not more excited, to be working with students. As you know, we're recording this here in February. We're moving toward the May 1 deadline, and it's just working with students in this process. It's honestly a gift.
It definitely is a gift. I couldn't agree with you more, Larry. That's the best part of my work as well, when I get to work with students and their families. And again, thank you for being such a friend of the podcast and college admissions in general. Now, since our last conversation about Michigan State, what new initiatives, academic programs, or campus developments should prospective students and their families be aware of?
Sure. Well, we've opened a very large building, a STEM teaching and research building, which gives us more lab space on campus, gives us more classroom space. It's also a building right in the center of campus, and there are many different lounges for students to study. And I've been inside that building many times on a classroom day, and you see students there gathering to study or group meetings or things like that. So it just becomes another campus resource. We have a new Multicultural Center, which opened just within the last year, which helps us support all of our students at Michigan State, because Michigan State, we've always had such diversity of students, and so that's really exciting. We have a brand new fitness and wellness center, which is opening in May. 293,000 square feet. So everything I think a student could want, from free weights to an indoor running track, to an indoor heated pool, to a rock climbing wall. And so, you know, it really doesn't matter what the weather is outside, but somebody has that ability to get exercise, to meet and connect with other people. And, John, there's so much talk about mental health, but certainly I think physical health and, just getting exercise and things like that helps in that process. And so it's exciting that that's, just about to open, and students I've talked to, families I've talked to are very excited for that, that facility. And it's going to be, I believe, I was talking to a colleague, a great meeting place on campus too. It's going to draw a tremendous number of people. And so a lot of energy. And to me, those are the kind of things that excite me when we do new things.
Well, there's definitely a lot of energy around Michigan State. And when you hear a campus expanding and with new programs and facilities, it really is a sign of all the great things that you've done up until now. And the future certainly continues to look bright. Now, how would you describe Michigan State's mission, values, and overall philosophy when it comes to student experience and their learning outcomes?
Sure. So I think the first part of it is, which it actually kind of almost starts with me or what I'm involved with. We feel that any student we offer admission to has the ability to graduate. And, I can tell you from personal experience, there are times when I'm reviewing a file, whether it's, I know we'll talk more about that, but in first review, second review, and I have to feel I can answer yes to that question, in my mind, like based on what I see, can this student get all the way through? And so what we continue to do is work to provide support for students, in the way of tutoring. So for example, our engineering students, they live together where they live. Free math tutoring 5 nights a week, 4 hours a night. So wherever you are on the calculus continuum, if you're willing to put in the time, we can't make it easier than not leaving your residence hall to get free tutoring to help you get through a class that's a challenge. But we have multiple writing centers around campus. We have multiple math help centers around campus. We have help centers in psychology, physics, biology, economics, and I could just keep going on and on and on. And so we really try hard to identify where are the common pain points, And what I would tell you too is when I speak with students, I say, look, if everybody thinks about it, you know what your weaknesses are. Please go for help. And when I talk to students and parents, I love to talk about the free tutoring because it's important that the parents know what resources are there when their student's having a bad day. Because parents, your students are going to go away to school and they're going to have a challenge. And the more you can know about the resources at that school, when hopefully you get that text from your students, the more it can help. So we have a lot of resources, built in academically, but also socially, also wellness. We talked about mental health. We've ramped up our mental health support that we have on campus because all of these things, it takes all of these things for somebody to be successful. And so we're committed in our future strategic plans to raising our graduation rates. But it's not simply, we understand that it's not, you write down a number. You have to do things. And like I said, we continue to add support. We continue to evaluate what's been effective and what hasn't.
Oh, that's terrific. There's definitely so many resources. And I love how you look at the child holistically, right? It's their social, emotional, and even physical well-being. You're not only concerned about what's going on in the classroom, which of course is really important, but also about their own self. You give them free tutoring, you have living commons in terms of your engineering students, you have help centers in all areas. And I love that you said too, Larry, students need to know what the resources are that are available to them, but they also have to learn to advocate for themselves. A lot of times in high school and even when they're a little younger, we do a lot for them to make sure that we're bringing them to the resources that they need to help. But in college students, it's very important that you're familiar with the resources that are available that Larry explained, but also you have to go and reach out and advocate for yourself. Now, in my conversations with students and parents, this thing called institutional priorities keeps coming up. People want to know more and more about it, Larry. So, what is Michigan State's institutional priority in terms of target freshman class size, and how does that compare to the overall number of applications you receive each year?
Sure. And I'm going to actually add an answer of why people are bringing that up to you, John. So the reason they're bringing it up to you is particularly in schools with lower admit rates, they are tweaking their institutional priorities. And my belief is that families and students feel that if they can understand ahead of time what they are, they can see how they might be a better fit in a school with a 20, 15, 10, 5% admit rate. At Michigan State, our admit rate is much larger. And I do want to talk about this. NACAC statistic, over 75% of the schools admit at least 50% or more of the students who apply. So in the New York Times, they write about schools that have 10% or less admit rates. That's not as many schools and universities as people think. And there are people who go to schools outside of that list who are very successful by any measure of how somebody would measure success. Getting to your question, I apologize for digressing, but I know why the question's coming up. So for us, we're looking for a freshman class somewhere in the range of, let's call it 93 to 9,600. We're adding on top of that probably close to 1,100 transfer students, which I'm always thrilled to mention because this is the part that lots of times people don't want to talk about. But transfer can be a great option for students for many, many different reasons. And so we take quite a few transfer students. And so from that, we admit the number of students that we feel can fit that class. And we have, over the years, some different statistical models. Those models continue to shift because particularly we weren't always on Common App. And when we went on the Common application, our applications went up. But some of those applications have less likelihood of a student matriculating because it's very easy for them to apply to one more school, two more schools, three more schools. I think test optional has also changed a little bit the landscape. And then what's also happened is students and families get concerned. Oh, there's all of a sudden this school, not Michigan State necessarily, but some school that's gotten much harder to get into. And now we have to apply to 10 more schools instead of one more school. And so in reality, it just kind of drives down yield. And so it means we have to admit more students, to fill a class. But we're looking at those numbers, every day. Even this afternoon, I sent a note to our director of admissions about how we're doing with out of state. We're looking at numbers every day and have some sense of what they mean based on what time of year it is.
Well, we appreciate those numbers, but I also want to repeat the statistic that you shared, which I think is most important for students and families to hear again. And this is from NACAC. Over 75% of the schools admit 50% or more of the students. And so if you're only looking at the top 20 list and applying just to those schools simply because they're on a top 20 list, you're really doing yourself a disservice. You have to really find that fit. There was a quote on one of the episodes. Someone said, if you're applying to UPenn and Dartmouth, both great schools, by the way, but if you're applying to UPenn and Dartmouth, you really didn't do your research because those two schools could not be more different. So students, families, do your research, find your fit, visit, see what resonates for you. I visited so many schools that I didn't think were going to be the right fit for my family. And guess what? I was wrong. So the lesson is get out there, do your research, and don't just look at the top 20. Now, are there state-based considerations, Larry, in admissions? For example, a specific proportion of students that must be from Michigan versus out-of-state students?
For us, no. We don't have a specific constraint that is keeping us at a certain percentage. So, no.
Fantastic. And can you walk us through Michigan State University's holistic review? For example, how many people review an application and what factors typically spark deeper discussion in committee review?
Sure. It's great when I get to talk about this on a day where I read both as a first reader and I was in committee today as well. So it's great. Not that I wouldn't remember if it happened yesterday, but it's very fresh. So, when I'm first reading an application and I am our first reader for the states of Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia, any application in those areas, I am the first reader. And I will first just look student's name, high school. High school is important to me because it puts in context of what's available in that school. We get documentation from the high school of what's available, but because I've covered, for example, the state of New York now for 16 years, I'm pretty familiar with what's available in different schools. And I'll look to see if a student submitted a test score or not. And I'm looking simply because I need to know whether that number exists. If it exists, I need to know what it is. If it doesn't exist, it's simply one data point we don't have, and that's fine. And then I'll start reading through the application. As I'm going, the secret I'll tell you, most admissions counselors want to admit. They start with a mindset of admit. So as I'm looking through the application, I am looking through where is evidence that I can hold on to that I could form a argument if it needed to be an argument. I'm not afraid to argue, but where can I advocate for this student and highlight what exists anywhere in their application packet? And so it could be activities. It could be what they've written in the essay. It can be on the transcript. And so any of those things, kind of become hooks of here's why this student can be successful at Michigan State. And that's really what it is. And so I always tell students that they need to think about their application that way, as providing evidence for somebody who wants to admit them of why they are a fit at that institution. Now, I'll be honest with you, there's sometimes students apply who they're just clearly not. It's just not the right fit. But then there's some where it just immediately, oh yeah, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing something else. They've had strong academic progress, and academic progress isn't just grades, but what is the rigor? What is the senior schedule? When we're in second review, that's always such a focus for us because very often we're looking at situations where it's very close. And so do we need to see senior grades? And so the first question is it even worth it for us to see senior grades? So is somebody taking some math, some English, some social studies, some science? Have they upped their game in terms of rigor? And when I say that on rigor too, sometimes I get the question, they'll say, oh, how many APs should I take? And people are so disappointed with my answer, which is, I have no idea. And the reason I have no idea is I don't know the academic level of that student. I don't know if APs are a good fit for that student. My advice is always simple. Please talk to your counselor in your high school. what is the right challenge for you? And you should be doing that each year when you're doing your scheduling. So from 9th to 10th, 10th to 11th, 11th to 12th. So every year, the rigor, the challenges need to be ideally right. I will tell you, we sometimes see it's wrong. I was looking at a file today where a student took like 6 APs. Based on the grades, maybe they should have taken 1 AP. So, challenges are good. It's about what's right for you. And so these are all things that come out in the review, in both first review and then in second review. I'm joined by other counselors who all have 10 years or more experience. So to give you an idea, as first reader, I've read easily, probably in the area now of 25,000 applications. And I don't even know how many I've seen second, but it's a huge, huge number. And so we're still constantly learning. There's still things we see where we're like, wait, we need to ask somebody else a question. And we have the ability to stop and do that. I don't have to move a file along today. If I need to get a right answer, and we're encouraged to do the due diligence, and that might mean all kinds of things. Sometimes I'll call a student. Sometimes I'll call a counselor in a high school. Sometimes I'll call in a colleague and say, hey, look at this file with me. I'm confused about something. And, maybe they happen to see a file from another school in their area with something similar. And it goes both ways. People call me all the time. I had several counselors call me yesterday. Hey, what do you see in this? And I enlighten them. And so it's really a process. But the key to remember is admissions counselors want to admit you. We are looking for evidence of why and how we can advocate so you can be admitted. And I would ask you to really think about that and also understand senior year is important. Because if I ask for grades for senior year, if they're not good, it's the end. I don't have more time. So please work hard senior year, because also it'll help you in your freshman year as well.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process.
Such great insight. You touched upon so many pieces. I love that you mentioned again that you are admissions counselors. You're looking for reasons to admit. So students, make sure that your overall application is comprehensive. Don't leave out any parts. And Larry, you did touch a lot about the academic portion, which of course is really important because first of all, you want to make sure that students are going to be able to come to your beautiful campus and handle the rigors of the academics. Now, the other part is that you want to see the type of community member that they're going to be. And of course, you look at the activities section in order to determine what is it that the student is going to be like in class, in the dorm room, and what have you. So the Common App activities section is limited in terms of number of characters a student may use to describe each of their activities. Larry, how important is it for applicants to communicate not only the activity, but their why or any leadership initiatives? And can you share an example of a student who did a really good job capturing this in that limited space?
Yeah, sure. I would be happy to. So, I think a student can definitely use the activity section to give us a good sense of what they're doing. What I would advise is try not to duplicate. In other words, if you've done a few different versions of really the same thing. Give us one version of that and make sure you can show all the things that you're involved in. What I have seen students do is, I think it's really that combination of the activities, what they write about in their essay, because why not write about a passion? If you're involved in an activity, what has it meant to you? And I think that ties it together nicely. And so I have seen students do that. The other thing I'll point out is the extra comments box in the Common App. I think it's very underutilized. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a student using that to further illuminate what they care about, what their why is. And that's something that I have seen students do as well. And it is important. And, flat out, I can tell you, in second review today, in almost every file in the counselor's notes, because that's part of what we're doing, we're seeing their notes, we're going through, we can look at anything we want. They're talking about the essay. They're talking about student was involved in this activity or some, they're not necessarily highlighting all of them. There's not necessarily room or time, but there's something that reached them, and that always encourages us to take a little look, kind of, and see what's there. And, that's the part too. Keep in mind, multiple people are going to look at this. That's why sometimes they say, like, don't use a lot of humor in your essay or things like that, because some will find it funny. There'll be others who will read the same application, they won't. Ultimately, we want to learn about you as a student, as a person, as somebody who's going to be hopefully a Spartan and wearing green and white for the rest of your life.
Well, that's terrific. And I love that you talked about, first of all, try not to duplicate students, because if you're duplicating throughout the overall application, it really is a missed opportunity. And so you mentioned listing the activities, but what I really love that you mentioned is that additional space on the Common App, using that to really give additional context into whatever it is, right? Whether it's about an activity, perhaps there was a dip in grades in 10th grade and there was a reason for it. Perhaps you were in 2, 3 high schools throughout that 4-year period, whatever it is, to give that context, to use that additional space. It's not there just for something tragic, heaven forbid, and those things happen as well. But if you want to give context into something, use that space, which I think is tremendous advice. Now, you also touched upon the essay. So, Larry, can you share an example of a personal statement that really stood out, not because of the topic, but because of how the student conveyed growth, values, or voice?
Sure. So, to me, the best essays always are where a student's really writing about something they clearly care about. And that's always my advice of what to write about. Students always say, well, what should I write about? The reality is, admissions counselors, we really don't care per se. One of my favorites that I think about often, we do certainly see many that are sports related. But I think of the one where somebody went to kick the winning soccer goal and they fell face first in the mud. And they talked about what they learned from that, and what it meant to them and how people treated them afterwards. And that's what ultimately, I think, an essay, personal statement would be great to be about. Whatever it was that you were involved with. I've had some where they write about time they spend with grandparents. And I had one recently, and they talked about how they went fishing with their grandfather. But they talked about how their grandfather taught them how to fish and taught them and created an enthusiasm in fishing. And so it really became part of them, and they may not think of it this way, but it's the way they'll carry their grandfather with them for the rest of their life. Now, I've seen students take the other tack, which isn't as helpful, where they spend most of the time talking about the grandfather, who was obviously an important person. We want to know about the student. So in other words, the grandfather, great that they're part of the story, but it's like, what did it mean to you? And so that's the key, I would say. And it's, like I said, it can be a little bit tricky, but I think, the key is if it's rooted in a story a student wants to tell, the likelihood that the essay is going to be better is very, very high.
Well, I appreciate you talking about how it's not so much about the topic, but how you use the topic to really give insight in terms of who you are as a person, your reflection, your thought process to really, again, give that insight. I think is so important because many times, as you put it, Larry, they'll write about a loved one and they spend a lot of time writing about the loved one, but we don't really learn anything new about the student. So again, students, it's not so much about the topic, but making sure that it comes back to you. And I love the example of going fishing with grandpa. I thought that was phenomenal. So thank you for that. Now, MSU, Larry, remains test optional, as you mentioned earlier. How do standardized test scores factor into admissions with your team? And what guidance would you give to students who are unsure about submitting them or not? Because that's another thing that we hear. Should I submit? Should I not? So shed some light on this for us, Larry, please.
Sure, be happy to. So first of all, I just want to say, at least in our system, a student who does not submit a test score is not penalized. It is simply a data point we don't have. And sometimes I'll have parents say to me, "Oh, but we spend so much money on test prep and time and this and that." And I'll be honest, I don't know why. I really don't understand why. But someday somebody will explain it to me that I understand. The reason I say that is because when you look at test scores and the average that a test prep can help a student, it's 100 points is a lot. In most cases, 100 points, you're not drastically changing the neighborhood a student is in. It's not as if you're going from some horrible neighborhood to a mansion on Park Avenue. You're going like across the street, maybe around the block. I mean, that's all you're doing. And so the amount of time, my concern is the time a student spends. The family wants to spend money, fine. But my thought is, could it be more beneficial if the student struggles in math to just hire a math tutor and have them spend that time working on math and gain confidence in math? Or if they need help in writing or some other area? Or it could be just enrichment. Maybe they want to learn how to play an instrument. Could that be more meaningful and a use of time? Because my concern is students have limited time. Even if parents are willing to just throw money, that's my concern. Now, I mentioned it's one data point. We require 2 years of a foreign language. So that means if you don't take beyond 2 years, that's 2 data points. I don't have foreign language for year 3 or year 4. So if I have a student who takes foreign language all through high school, they are more likely to actually have more academic classes that we're going to pay careful attention to than somebody else. So I want to just say that to try to put in perspective of what a test score is. I found in my experience more often it's a corroborating number than an outlying number. It's similar to a student's academic performance in the classroom. Sometimes not, and sometimes not both ways. I've seen where students are very strong students in the classroom and the test score doesn't match. You know, in 4 years of high school, you're taking strong classes, you're making great academic progress, you're probably going to do okay in college. I have seen students with very high test scores, 14, 1500s, with very low grades. Why are they going to become a good student in college? But like I said, those are more outliers. You know, more often when I see a B student, you know, they have an 1150, 1200 SAT. And that's fine. It's a corroborating number. So it's a part. In my opinion, it gets more attention than it's worth. I can only advocate on a number once. I can advocate from a transcript so many more times. So I hope that helps just put it in perspective for you and most importantly for the audience.
Oh, it's definitely a huge help. And I'm also curious, what are some common misconceptions families have when applying to a large public like Michigan State? And I know you've covered a lot already. And what should applicants be doing differently?
You know, to me, the biggest thing is I would say think about your senior schedule. That's just the biggest thing because I just think so many times when we're in second review, it's almost a little bit of a disappointment because we'd want to let the student in, but they're just not doing that much academically their senior year. And I understand that there's a want to get out and do internships and jobs and things like that. But you are still preparing for what's going to be a significant academic challenge in your first year in a college or university, whether it's Michigan State or anywhere else. And to me, the way you prepare for a challenge is to have a challenge. And that challenge specifically needs to be academic. If you can add other things to that, great. But I think people are overlooking, students and parents, the importance of senior year. Because there's a lot of people that carp on junior year. Yeah, junior year is part of it, but you know what? You have a great junior year and you do very little senior year. I'm willing to bet heavily that first year, freshman year is not going to be a great year wherever you go to school.
Well, I think that's a great point to keep building ramps even in senior year. It's so important to keep taking your math, your science, social studies, English classes, and what have you, because think about it. A year later, you're going to be in college, and it's definitely not going to get easier. So you want to definitely keep the practice of building ramps and applying yourself academically through all 4 years of high school. So I think that's great. And Larry, unfortunately, we're approaching the end of the conversation. But before I ask the last question, I always like to ask, is there a question I didn't ask or a topic that we didn't cover yet that you'd like to share with us now?
You know, the one thing I just would say too, you touched on it a little bit, but I think it's so important and not particular to Michigan State, but just for the college process. Visit schools. Wherever you live in this great country, we have so many colleges and universities. So even early on, try to visit a school that's in a city. Try to visit a school that has a traditional campus. Try to visit another one. These may not be particular institutions even that you're thinking you want to go to, but look at different options and then create a list of questions of what it is you have to learn on any visit you make of what environment is going to be important to you academically, culturally, socially. Parents ask questions about finances. All important. So make your lists of questions of what you have to know and get out and visit.
Such great advice. Such great advice, Larry. I remember when I was going through it with my own daughters, I really enjoyed taking the extended weekend trip, and we would stop at different colleges while we were going through the process. And I'll tell you, there was one school that we were visiting. And I was not really into visiting that school because I know that the only reason why we were going there is because my wife's cousin's daughter was a freshman there at the time. And at the time, I knew nothing about the school. Well, we visited and we all fell in love with it. And the lesson learned there is that you really don't know. You just don't know unless you get in the car. Sometimes you have to hop on an airplane or what have you and just go and visit because you learn so much. Larry, we learned so much today. You're awesome. Unfortunately, we have reached the last question, which always is, what are your top three pieces of advice? And you've given so much already, but what are your top three pieces of advice for students and families getting ready for the college process?
Sure. And I'm glad you asked. And John, just thank you so much for having me and letting me talk about this process and letting me talk about Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you, Larry. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would say, in terms of advice, I think, first of all, just try to be organized. I encourage students, have a notebook, make notes along the way, understand that this is a journey. It's not a short journey, but it's an exciting journey because it's a journey of discovery. You will learn so much about yourself in this process. And that's why I always feel so privileged to share this process with so many students over the years. So you will learn about yourself. But make notes along the way when you take these visits, when you ask these questions, take notes, be organized. It'll help you. It'll make you more relaxed. I think, secondly, do research. This is a research project. And where I suggest doing research is very simple. Use the college and university websites, not third-party websites. Now, people might say, well, why is that? Well, it's very simple. We constantly are updating our web pages. If something changes in a program, if something changes in admissions, if something changes in any way, we are updating it before it actually changes. Also, don't be afraid to call the admissions office. Another way to do research. If you have an ability to go to a college fair, particularly if it's a NACAC college fair, National Association of College Admissions Counseling, go. Now, why do I say a NACAC fair specifically? Because I go to a lot of college fairs. NACAC college fairs require that there be at least one full-time admissions counselor from that university in the booth space at all times. So you are not talking to a volunteer. We have some very qualified alumni volunteers. None of them know as much as I know. So you will get to talk to somebody from admissions. So go if you have those opportunities. And there are many coming up this spring. So if you just search NACAC college fairs, you can find out where they are, when they are. They're free. All kinds of big cities, great opportunities, but all over the country, all over the country. So that's second piece of advice. And third and last piece of the advice, have fun with this. This is your life. Enjoy it. Enjoy the journey. Yeah, there'll be bad days, but there's going to be some spectacular days in this process too. So enjoy the journey. This is for both students and parents. Remember, parents, when you're going on some of these college trips, cherish the time. This may be the last time for a little while where you get to spend that kind of undivided attention with your son or daughter. Students, remember, this is going to be a unique time for you to bond with one or both of your parents, just depending on who's on a particular trip. So enjoy those moments that time.
Well, that's tremendous advice. First of all, be organized. And you're absolutely right, because you start seeing so many different schools and you forget what you saw where. But I also love how you talked about do your research. And if you're going to look online, look at the individual colleges or universities' website, because it is their responsibility to keep their websites up to date with the latest information. So, like Larry said, don't go to the third party websites, go directly to the university websites for the most up-to-date information about the college or university. I love also how you talked about NACAC. I've been to many of their college fairs. I go to their conferences every year. There's nothing like it. And I will link the NACAC college fairs in the show notes. And lastly, as a family unit, have fun. Really enjoy it. I definitely did with my family, which is why I do the podcast. Larry, you're awesome. This was a terrific conversation. I'm so grateful for your mentorship, your friendship, and for taking the time to really share with all of the listeners. Thank you so much, Larry. Looking forward to having you again.
John, thanks. I can't wait.
Our pleasure. Thank you. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care all, and best wishes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAP.
Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.